Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Ashley, and today I'm joined by Oleg Lougheed. Oleg is the founder of Overcoming Odds and Moments Worth Remembering, and his story is one that truly embodies endurance in every sense. He is incredibly inspiring, and I'm honored to invite him into this space, not just to share his story, but also reflect with me on the deeper threads of human connection, showing up with intention, and learning to stay grounded in a performance driven culture. So, with that, Oleg, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining me.
Of course, what an introduction. I was going to say, I don't even know where you pulled half of that from, but that's amazing.
Well, you've shared your story on multiple outlets,
Uh-huh.
including platforms like the TEDx stage, and I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit. I would love for you to share parts of your journey here, but I was really thinking about this conversation, and from what I've heard from you in different interviews and even our conversation before, you just offer so many incredible insights and perspectives, and I would love to go there a little bit too. But growing
Sure.
up as an orphan in Russia, navigating unimaginable adversity at such a young age, when you look back on that, what is something that you understand about yourself now that you couldn't have grasped at that time? And can you share just a part of that journey that led to that realization?
I think it's a really good question and it's a timely question because I was actually thinking about it completely unrelated to this conversation we're having right now, but I'm working on a book and part of the journey involves going back and forth with the editor. And so how my process works is that I have an editing team that I'm working with. And so I will do the first draft, so to speak, of my thoughts, reflections, memories, because I'm the only one that truly knows them as I've experienced them. I send it back to them, and then they typically will send me some questions or things that need additional clarification. And so one of the chapters that we were talking about this past week was actually exactly to your question. And it's the elements of my past and how I've been able to look at my past today and develop the perspective that I have. So I think first thing that I've realized and first thing that I've learned in looking back at my past and having had the opportunity to make a lot of these big decisions at a very young age. One of those decisions was actually choosing to give up my parental rights at a relatively young age. I think I was 9 years old, going into an orphanage. So the thing that I learned from that decision that I don't think I fully grasped back then was the consequences of every decision, right? So I believe you make decision every single day. I believe we make hundreds, if not thousands of them of varying degrees. Some have higher consequences, others not so much. And it wasn't until I was older that I began to realize that with every single one of the decisions that I make, there's a potential set of consequences that I'm yet to experience. Now, the interesting part about that is you don't really know the consequences, nor can you 100% foreshadow them, right?
That's the hardest part.
Exactly. And I think that's the hardest part. That's the most beautiful, the most challenging part of any decision. You make a decision and you don't know what the outcome is going to be. Now, some decisions, like I said, are harder than others. Decisions when it comes to, let's say, relationships. Something that I'm experiencing within my own life right now is the evolution of some of the friendships that I have had over the years. So it could be 5, 10, 15-year relationships that are evolving into a different form or a different type of relationship or completely dissolving. And that is the challenging part, right? Is what decisions am I making right now and how are those impacting the future of that potential connection? So that's the first thing that I realized as I was reflecting upon it. And the other thing that came to mind is understanding that at any given moment, I'm operating with a very high degree of uncertainty of my future. I think in thinking about the future and hoping with the best of intentions and highest of aspirations, it doesn't always turn out that way. And I really mean that from the most positive lens that I could imagine. I genuinely believe that I try to be a positive individual as often as I can. I will say that for me, there are certain aspects of positivity that are not my default setting, so to speak. And I don't know if you can relate to this, Ashley, or anyone that's going to be listening to this, but there's the thing within me that I've observed, whether it's walking a dog or seeing negative circumstances, that sometimes wants to engage, right? Want to engage in the drama and see where it takes me and all those things. And I'm realizing that it, to some degree, is just naturally who I am at this point. It's part of my operating system, and it might have been from the first day that I was born. And so being able to rewire that and condition myself to think positive has also given me a chance to learn, and even thinking about those childhood years, that so much of our operating system can be reprogrammed, that we can choose to look at any given set of circumstances or any given set of events through a different lens. And so that's another thing that I've learned in looking back at my past and where I am today, is the distance that I've been able to create. Not only the physical distance between the place that I was born and the place that I'm at right now, but also the mental distance through different reframes, through different people, through different conversations that I have had, who have helped me develop so many different stories and perspectives that I can choose to look at any one of the events that have happened within my life. And I think that's a really beautiful part. And the reason why I think it's beautiful is I believe it's accessible to all of us. Any one of us can look at our past, and you share that past with enough people, and then you listen to the feedback of what they've heard and how they've heard it. And then you get to choose kind of maybe a different story, different narrative to how you perceived a particular set. Oh, it's a very loaded answer to your question,
It's a loaded question, I think, for sure,
but it was a
too.
loaded question to begin with. There you go.
Definitely. I mean, it's a part of your story that really sticks out to me is the choice that you made at age 9 to
Hmm.
enter the orphanage, which is a decision that most kids will never have to face in that. But it's that decision, nonetheless, the choice that you had in that without knowing what's on the other side. And I think about how often that just paralyzes us throughout life of the unknown,
Hmm.
and how do we possibly move forward with confidence in something, knowing that we don't know what the outcome is, you know? And I think that it's something that can hold us back from trying something because of the fear of what the result is. What are some ways that people can just practice freely choosing something? Can you do that? Like what does that look like for somebody who may be stuck in the decision making?
It's a really good question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is Nike's slogan, just do it. I truly believe to some degree, any decision can be as simple as that. Just do it, live with the consequences, embrace the uncertainty, know that the decision might unfold differently or the result might compared to the expectation that you have. Another way that I've been able to do this within my own life is to continuously challenge the assumptions and expectations of anything and everything, right? And I think it's easy, I'll speak from my perspective. It's easy for my mind to create a set of expectations based on anything and want certain things. And then the reality proves otherwise 99% of the time, maybe 100% of the time. And so I realized that, okay, in most situations, the outcome was going to be different than how I perceive it anyway. And so going into it with the mindset of just do it. Now, I think there is some degree of intentionality that also plays into that. I don't mean just make any and every decision available to you. I think that the intentionality comes into make the decision that you feel most confident in, make the decision that you feel will put you in the best possible position to experience the version of yourself, the future of yourself, the whatever of yourself that you want to experience, right? That comes to friendships, that comes with other forms of relationships, that comes with business, that comes with a job, you name it. And so I think that intentionality, once it's placed upon it, it in some ways guides the decision making process. I think it also impacts confidence drastically. I think it creates this perception that the decision was made in the right way, that it's a good decision that one made. And so I realized that for me, from my own story, in going with this mindset of just do it and then live with whatever outcome that's bound to happen, has really helped me in every decision making process. Most of the decisions that I think I make now are based on that. I think the biggest thing that I've realized and learned from my own experience, as well as the experiences of other people that I've been able to observe, is many of the people operate from the lens of just do it, tomorrow, right? I'll wait until tomorrow. I'll wait until next minute. I'll wait until the next hour to make the decision. And it could be for varying factors. Sometimes it is truly the fear of making it. Sometimes it's rejection. I mean, I don't know how many times I face that on a daily basis. To some degree, I probably intentionally do it. And I think I'll give you an example. One of the jobs that I do is I work with a lot of different clients, some of the ones that I've introduced you to, helping them with PR, marketing type work. And part of my job involves reaching out, cold reaching out to other individuals, pitching these clients on their behalf for whatever podcast project, whatever it might be. Now, you could imagine, right, the number of rejections that you might receive from that process. It's a very high number. Now, I could get paralyzed by that whole process. From the first rejection that I receive, I could start telling myself the story of, hey, I just need to stop doing this. Now, in doing that, I'm simultaneously going to lose business from my clients because then they're not going to achieve the results that they want. And so I realized that to some degree, the concept of just doing it and then also just practicing, I think it's probably just like anything else when it comes to building something. It's just like a muscle, right? The more you do it, the more comfortable you become, the more confident you become in that. And then from there, it just becomes like any other decision. It's just something that you do that you don't even think about it, like brushing your teeth or whatever else that you choose to do on a daily basis without giving it any thought, because it's been so habitually ingrained into who you are in your daily routine. And so I think for me, that's really been the process, is just following that and don't give myself the opportunity to take a step back, to second guess and to question, should I be making this decision or not? Is this a good decision or a bad one? Just make the decision based on whatever intention that I have for it, and then just live with the outcome. And don't be married to the outcome either. If the outcome didn't turn out the way that you wanted to, learn to live with it, reframe it.
I love that approach. And I also am thinking about what you said regarding the stories that we attach to something and how we can even get stuck in those stories, which then can keep us from moving forward. You know, we think about the other people that we're showing up to, whether it's your clients or whatever it is, you have to just keep moving forward in that. And how often the stories that we're creating, which are just stories, they're just thoughts
Yeah.
that we're having about this
Yeah.
meaning that we're attaching to it, and how we can get stuck in that loop. So I want your thoughts on this, because I think this is another part to that, is the inability to influence situations. So for things that are just out of our control, which oftentimes you're doing the work, you're doing what you can do in this process, and then the outcome is what it is. So how do you not internalize those parts that are out of, that are out of our control?
Well, I think that's another really good question. You're full of them today. Truly can prepare here. The first thing I'll say is, when I go into a lot of situations, I try to understand that one of the best, if not the only ways I can influence any sort of outcome moving forward is the effort that I put out there. Period. I don't think there is much more than that I can do. I am in no position to control how you're going to respond to an email, to a phone call, to whatever mode of communication that I choose to pass on your way, right? I am in no control of how you feel when you receive that piece of communication. You might be going through the most difficult loss in your life. A loved one might have passed. A dog might have passed. You might be experiencing some sort of financial problems. You might have just been let go from your job. So there's 1,001 things that might be happening in your own life that are going to occupy your attention, and they're also going to dictate the way that you're going to respond to my particular message. Something else that I've learned throughout this process of communication, it's that oftentimes not everyone reads the message in its entirety. Sometimes people read the message just based on keywords. So you might read my message and there might be a specific keyword that's going to resonate to where you are at in life, and that will dictate your response. It's funny. It's really funny sometimes to receive a response that has nothing to do with the question that you had asked, but yet there was a specific keyword somewhere in there that triggered whatever it is the person is feeling. So I believe that a lot of the times whenever I'm getting a response from another individual, it is simply me being an outlet for where they are at in life and what they might be experiencing. So what can you control when it comes to that process? It's the effort that you put out there in the communication. And then from there, I think that's it. How the person responds, when they respond, what they say is completely out of your control. The thing that you mentioned that I really like is the stories and the meaning that you choose to assign to each and every one of the circumstances. I think you're absolutely spot on. And I think that's available to us at any given time. And that's something that I either neglected or I forgot from time to time, is realizing that, hey, events are going to happen with or without me, period. The difference between a good event and a bad event is the meaning that I choose to assign to that event, right? Someone cuts you off in traffic, and then me choosing to respond by giving them the finger and all these things, or me just choosing to let them go and not respond, are two completely different responses that are going to create two completely different stories for when I come back home and choose to tell that story to my friends. Right. So that's what I realized within a lot of this, and really been focused on for a number of years, probably, is understanding the stories and the role those stories play within our lives, how they dictate who we are, who we become, and ultimately how they wire a lot of our own operating systems and what we choose to operate from. Now, one other thing that I've observed through my experience is when I became very aware of the stories and the impact of them, and how I actually get to choose the meaning and the stories for a lot of these individual events, oftentimes, it made me more optimistic person. And I don't really know the correlation between the two, but in some ways it gave me this, it energized me. It gave me a sense of empowerment that, okay, something is happening, or this person responded this way. Now, I don't have to embody their energy, right? I don't have to embody their narrative. However it is they're choosing to respond is out of my control, and it's completely in their own experience. So to some degree, I think it's a really freeing framework to operate from. Now, I'm also going to say that for me, it didn't happen overnight. It's been years and years and years of reminding myself, being reminded by other people who are close to me, that I've given permission to give me that type of feedback and criticism in return. But I will say that once I've fully understood that and started to put that into practice, life changed completely. Things about my past changed, things about the present day changed, and then that all simultaneously impacts the future and how you choose to see the world moving forward.
I love that. And I think when you give yourself that space and time to reflect about past situations as
Hmm.
well that maybe haven't been so favorable, whatever that looks like. But again, going back, because it's like we live in these stories and meanings in that way. So, and we have that power to choose what that meaning looks like. And something I love, I heard you share this before in an interview, was this whole concept of the cards that were dealt.
Hmm.
And oftentimes, we talk about like, oh, these we just got, dealt a bad hand of cards. But you reframe that in a way of I wanna let you speak to that about the hands that we can make out of those cards.
I think so something that I believe in regard to this is that you can't control the cards that you are dealt in your life. You can't control the cards that you are dealt pretty much in any given set of circumstances. What you can control, at least what I've come to understand, is the fact that you have an opportunity to go back into what I believe is the ultimate deck, and that's just life in general. You can go back into that deck, you can reshuffle those cards and get a new set of cards. So part of that process, I think it goes back to the stories, right? The stories that I choose to carry with me about my past, about my present, that might not be favorable, that might not be working with me in any given set of circumstances. And then being able to reframe them, choosing different narratives, choosing different stories to operate from, for me has been a really beautiful perspective, because once again, it's given me freedom and it's given me this ultimate sense of empowerment that, okay, the circumstances might not be favorable to me. The past might not be favorable to me. How can I flip that around? How can I make that favorable? What can I do that can help change the circumstances into my favor, into my advantage? Something that I can learn from. Learning, I think, has also been a huge tool for me. Learning and gratitude, two big things that I think, I'm sure there are a lot of other people can relate to this and have had similar experiences. But within my own life, I've started to realize that two things started to happen. When I started to look at some of the more difficult or less favorable events that have happened within my own journey and started to approach it through the lens of, what did it teach me? What was I there to learn? And what can I be grateful for? That shifted that whole thing. It almost simultaneously created this new space of exploration where I was able to look at those set of negative circumstances or events through a lens of gratitude. And that's, okay, these things have happened. They negatively impacted me in the moment. But what can I take away from that particular set of events into my day tomorrow? Into the upcoming year, into the upcoming years? What can I take from the friendships that, let's say, dissolved for whatever reason into the current friendships? And then simultaneously, how can those friendships become even better, even deeper, and I'm more connected to through a lot of those experiences? So, long story longer here is that I believe every single one of the events is there to serve me at any given moment. It's just more so a question of, am I willing to take a step back and ask myself that question of, what did they teach me? What am I here to learn? And that's where I think, once again, that's accessible to all of us. You don't need to pay for it. You don't need to access it in some trivial way. It truly is just through the asking of the question and then being able to create a space where I can reflect upon that experience. That's it. And then whatever reflection I choose from that, it's purely mine, or it's purely yours, or anyone else's, right? No one else gets to define and say, hey, Ashley, that was a really bad reflection. I can't believe you reflected that. No one's going to tell you that. You got to choose that. And whatever takeaways, whatever lessons I took from that particular experience, those are the takeaways and the lessons that I can move forward with in the coming days.
I love that no one can take your story from you. That's
Yeah,
something that I feel like I'm constantly
solely
reminding
yours.
myself. It's yours. And so how somebody else chooses to receive that as well is on them. Going back to what you were saying before and how freeing that is in, just how it is that we show up and what we offer, where it's like it's out of our control how you respond. But this is what I'm putting on the table. This is my offer, whether it's your story or whether it's whatever kind of gift or work, whatever that may be, any kind of environment. So I love that
Mhm.
reframing it. It feels so light to like move
Yeah.
about, life in these ways.
Do you have a journal? Do you ever
I do.
journal about
I
experiences,
do.
just day-to-day moments?
Yes, and I love what you said about asking yourself the questions, because I think that's one of the ways. I mean, I would say I'm a fairly introspective person in general, but it's the questions that we ask. It's how we learn about one another, I think, and how we break down barriers between one another is asking these kind of questions that it's how we learn, It's just it's how we learn. So, and it's how we learn about ourselves. But am I willing to go there? And I think that when we choose to go there, you discover so much about yourself through that process of responding to those questions.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, all there is really is you. and how you choose to experience the experience that you do. I
So good.
remember my dad, I think it was my dad that told me this one day. I was sitting in the same room as him, visiting them back home in Ann Arbor, and we were talking about just neighbors, life, and how there's so many different ways to do any given task. For example, washing the dishes. I remember we even had a full blown conversation about this, and he had shared with me how many different ways you can wash a dish, right? You can put it in a dishwasher, you can do it in a sink. Even when you do it in a sink, you could leave the water on. You can fill up both sinks. You can fill up one with water, one with soap, both with soap, etc. You get the point. And so one of the things that he had mentioned to me is that we started talking about just the concept of you and experiences in conflict. And he said something that has stuck with me ever since, and that is, most of the time, the problem is you. As in, the problem that I'm experiencing with another individual, it's not really the problem with you or whoever the individual is. It's really the problem with me and myself internally, right? It's the tension that I'm experiencing between the expectation or version of whoever that I created within myself based on my own experiences. And I found that to be such a profound statement because I was thinking to myself, it's a really freeing statement to think about. And that's in thinking, okay, if the problem is me, therefore I can probably solve it most of the time, right? It's just a matter of approaching it through a different lens, through journaling, through reflection, through talking to other people, through whatever that communication might be, addressing what it is that caused that problem, addressing the tension that it creates, and then being able to move past that. Ever since I don't know how many years it's been a number of years since I've had that conversation with him. And I realized that in reflecting back upon it, how profound that statement truly is. That most of the time, if not even all of the time, the problem is truly me. And that's how I'm experiencing the particular reality. And so that goes to events, that goes to people, that goes to relationships, whatever the form of conflict is. It's rarely the other person. It's just that the other person has brought up a version of me that I am feeling confronted with because I may or may not have encountered that version before, right? I don't know if you can relate to this, or once again, that anyone that's going to be listening to this, but have you ever had this moment in your life where someone has said something or someone had done something and it brought up what you felt like the worst version of you? Right? Truly a version you've never seen in your life before. It's not the other person. I've had moments like that. And I realized in those moments, it's not the other person, it's me. It's just a different version of me. It's a version of me that I haven't encountered in that particular setting yet. And so taking ownership of that and also taking accountability that, okay, if the problem is me a lot of the time, then therefore there are things that I can do with that information.
It just happened.
There you
It
go.
just happened. That's what
Right
I'm
in your
thinking
mind.
about it. In just a conversation that I was having with my husband, actually, and he had just said something to me the other day, and it was literally on this point. It was like, have you ever thought about, like, maybe there's something in you that's, like, uncomfortable more so than how it is I'm approaching this situation? Like, what is it
Exactly.
that actually makes you so uncomfortable about that thing, less than, how I'm handling the situation? I was like, no, you're right. Like, it is, like,
But it's
but
true.
it's true. It's like, what is that thing that I'm getting so bothered by? And that's that internal tension. It just allows you that space to actually think about, like, what is it that I'm actually getting so bothered by?
Yeah.
It's not a high stakes thing.
No. And it happens daily, right? It happens daily within ourselves. It happens daily with other people. And that's one of the reasons why I had asked you if you journal, because I found that for me, whenever I started journaling and processing a lot of the thoughts and experiences, not only not only am I able to pull out other thoughts and experiences through that writing process, but there's also something freeing about it. There's something about the whole practice where I know if I am journaling and Journaling in a way that I'm able to freely release a lot of the deeper thoughts and emotions that I'm experiencing and not masking them or beating around the bush, but really writing down the event or circumstances that I might have had, how it felt, what it feels like now, how I want to feel, what happened, what I think happened, all these different things. At the end of it, I feel lighter. I feel lighter as in I'm walking away with a different perspective 99 or 100% of the time because I've been able to put all those words on paper and develop other alternative ways to view whatever that set of circumstances was. And so I realized that it's such a powerful tool and practice that I was introduced to by probably a number of people at this point, and they all do the same thing. They do it daily. Every single day, they'll start with that, and they end the day with that. I'm not as disciplined where I do it. I just do it once a day, and I feel like that's enough for me. And I will do it at different points of the day. For example, sometimes I'll do it in the morning. Sometimes I'll do it in the middle of the day. And a lot of that for me has to do with how it is that I feel going into whatever activity that's ahead. Now, there's sometimes you go into activity and you just feel like something blocking you, right? Something's still on your mind, something's still on your chest. So that's where I'll go back and I'll actually journal that thing. And then from there, I think it frees up more space. But that was my reason for asking you, do you do that? Because I found that to be such a powerful process because it removes so much of the tension that otherwise I would be carrying with me for the rest of
Yes.
the day, the rest of the week, the rest of the month. I mean, I'm imagining a conversation you might have had with your husband, conversation I might have had with my friend or whoever that brought up some tension. I believe that if I don't choose to create the space to be able to process that, then I'm going to carry that into my next connection. Right. And some of those connections might not be as forgiving when it comes to the person that I'm going to show up as. I mean, I can only imagine going from, let's say, a conflict that I've experienced within one of my friendships, going into a business relationship or meeting somebody for the first time with a business purpose. And then all of a sudden they say something or they say it in a particular way, and then boom, all of that energy gets released onto them.
Yeah. It goes
Talk
back
about
to
not knowing the impact.
For sure. I think it also goes back to what you were saying earlier as well, where we don't know what somebody else is kind of dealing with. Like if you're
Yeah.
sending an email to somebody, we don't know what's happening in their life that could be weighing on them and how that's going to influence how it is that they respond. And it's the same thing, I believe, with things that are going on. And if we walk in with that kind of energy, how it influences that interaction or that,
Yes.
type of engagement. And what I think is most helpful through that kind of writing process as you're talking, at least from my perspective, and would love your take on this, is just it doesn't necessarily control the outcome because as we've talked about,
Hmm.
we can't influence that all the time, but it changes our experience of that thing, and that's where I think that's where the difference is in how we're experiencing whatever it is that we're walking into or whatever situation or whatever work that we have at hand, how we can experience it.
Yeah.
And is it with excitement or anxiety? Because oftentimes what I've learned too is like it shows up the same in our bodies,
Yep.
but that meaning.
Yep.
So,
And I think
yeah.
at the end of the day, it's going to do what I believe is the only thing we're here to do, and that's to experience. Period. And I can't, I haven't, and I've pondered on this question for going on to 32 years, and I'm still doing it. And that's why am I here? What's the purpose? What's the meaning? What's the meaning of life? And I've come to realize that really all I'm here to do is to experience it. I'm here to experience it through my own journey, and I'm here to experience it with the beings that are surrounding me. I think that's all there is to do. And so you're absolutely spot on when it comes to it changes your experience because that's exactly what it does is being able to take a step back to reflect upon whatever the event and whatever the meaning that I chose to assign within that given moment. And then from there, pick and choose the different meaning if needed that I want to carry with it moving forward. There are times within my own life where I have had different situations. Friendships is the first thing that comes to mind where things were not resolved or handled in the best possible way in the moment. And then through time, through reflection, individual reflection, reflection, we were able to find, or I was able to find different perspectives. And so, in some ways, I look at those moments and I think about the importance of them and the importance being an opportunity to learn. I'm always given that. Whether I choose to learn, that's a different topic, right? And so that goes back to how you and I even started this conversation. And that's, how do you make decision? How do you make these choices? So to me, it's innate at this point because I've been doing it for so long. For anyone who might be starting that journey, just like anything else, start small, moving to the bigger ones. And then from there, the more you do it, the better you become. But the beauty of being able to look at the whole experience and know that, okay, I'm here to experience, and most likely I'm going to experience all of the things that life has to offer, right? It's fascinating to me to look back at earlier versions of myself and the times when I would wish to not experience certain things, or I would say, this is never going to happen to me, or this will always be this way. And then literally through 24 hours or 48-hour difference or a year difference, I'm experiencing that thing that I once upon a time said I would never experience, or it's always going to be like that. So I think it, to some degree, what I found is those statements can be very restricting. They can be very limiting. I don't know what's ahead. I don't know what's around the corner. And the fact that all of the human beings, at least that I'm surrounded with, are so unique and drastically different from one another, and the things that we go through, like you said, you might be going through things in your own life that are probably different than the things that I'm going through. And then the same thing is true vice versa. Therefore, the versions that we're going to get of each other is going to be very different. So how I'm going to respond to you based on your set of circumstances today is probably going to be different than how I'm going to respond to you tomorrow and in a week and in a year and in 20 years. And the same is going to be true from your perspective. So that's where element of acceptance, forgiveness play a big role. And I know from my lens, what I try to practice is the fact that I can forgive. It's much harder to forget. But through forgiveness, I've learned that it kind of opens up that space again where you can accept new perspectives and better ways that you can actually move forward in life through peace and gratitude, instead of holding on to these things that are going to only show up in other forms and impact what's already there.
Totally. And you mentioned this before too in your story, just like some of that, maybe resentment even with
Yeah.
your mother, but then you flip this in ways too of like the skills that you have learned as well and
Yeah.
how you can reframe that too. And so there's always an opportunity to reframe it. It takes some intentionality and stillness, I think, to go there. Speaking about experiences and moments, and even going back to again the top of the conversation, just throughout this conversation, talking a lot about decision making and outcomes and this whole podcast project for me is literally like learning to surrender the outcome and it's been a very like fruitful space. It's been a healing space for me in many ways. And so for me, there's a lot that I have struggled with from a performance pressure standpoint.
Okay.
And I think that also comes in the form not just through my athletic journey, but decision making and challenges that I experienced in my life. And so I think performance pressure can make us focus so much on, what that next thing is going to be. And then oftentimes we can miss what's actually happening in the now. So that's why I would love for you to share a little bit about moments worth remembering and what you're doing there, because essentially it's bringing, it's crowdsourcing these kind things that people are saying and thinking about somebody else and then creating, this amazing tangible produced book. And
Uh
for
huh.
me, I love albums, I love photos. That's like everything to me. I print everything off right away whenever we do trips and that, because there's something about that for me that's so meaningful and important. So I love this whole concept, and I would love if you would just share how this kind of came to life and what it's taught you about appreciating
Yeah.
people in your life and just being present with one another.
So for me, the journey started from seeing my grandpa pass. It's been a number of years by now, but I remember having this realization of sitting at his funeral as a few rows back from kind of the main stage. And I was able to listen to different stories that were shared about him from the perspective of my dad, my uncle, my aunt. And I realized in that moment something in that so many people go through life unrecognized, so many people go through life unheard. And I got very curious about a lot of the stories that I was hearing about him. And that is, I wonder how much of that he really knew. Now, there was no way to answer that question because there was no way for me to ask him that question. So I didn't really do anything with that at that particular moment. It's just something I carried in the back of my mind. And then I tried to instill that within the different things that I was doing through the different nonprofits I was involved with, different groups, different communities. And I started to realize within a lot of those spaces a similar trend. And that's many people wanting to be heard, many people wanting to have the opportunity to voice their own experience, and yet not being able to give in, no, or maybe they didn't create the spaces to do that. So that was where I started to kind of play around and experiment with that. And that is, I started to ask myself the question of what would it be like if we were to spend the opening of a call recognizing a particular individual. And then boom, that's where the magic started to happen. When I intentionally created the space and the time to recognize each one of the people entering the room, to have all of the other individuals share something unique and special about what they're grateful for when it comes to that person. And then from that point on, I started to think, okay, this is the impact I've been able to see. What if we're actually able to do it through even more reflection? So that's where I think the written form comes in, being able to put together these books, ask people closest to the individual, family members, friends, work colleagues, anyone who knows them, to express what it is that that person means to them. There's a great book that I've read recently. I don't know if you read it yet or not. It's called, I'm going to probably butcher the title here. I keep doing this. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People.
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
It's a Dale Carnegie book. And one of the things that he talks about in there are the desires. And so the desires that all of us have in our lives. And then so it's the desire for health, it's the desire for money, it's the desire for sexual satisfaction. It's all these different desires that all of us have. And so his theory that he proposed throughout the book is that one of the greatest desires that many, if not all of us have, that oftentimes goes neglected, is the desire to be appreciated or the desire to be valued and to be seen. And I remember reading that chapter and then rereading that chapter and reading it again and thinking to myself how true that statement really is. I think so many of us go through life and for a variety of reasons, we don't choose to express some of our deeper thoughts and emotions towards another individual. A lot of that has to do with fear of rejection. A lot of that has to do with assumptions, assuming that you know how it is that I feel about you or how it is that people closest to you feel about them, or the same is true vice versa, right? Then there's also the distractions, the busyness of life, 101 reasons for why so many of us don't choose to do that on a daily basis. The reality of the matter is life is short. And it's shorter for some of us than it is for others. And so not being able to take a step back and to reflect and to share those things with the person when they're alive, I think it's a great tragedy. I think it's a great tragedy to be able to only have things like this shared when the person is gone and no longer able to hear those things. So that's what I started to do within my own life is I said, hey, once again, going back to decisions, I'm going to make the decision to celebrate every single person in my life who's had an impact. So when I was first starting this off over 2 years ago, I remember writing down all of the different names on a sheet of paper, and I took no exception to each name. I didn't tell myself that, oh, this person had too small of an impact, or this person only hosted me on their podcast, or this person did this. I just said, hey, this person impacted my life. And if it wasn't for this person choosing to say yes to me, for bringing me onto their platform, for inviting me into their home when I was in their city, for all these different things, I would not be the person that I am today, nor would I have the perspectives that I have today. So I didn't judge any of the individuals. I started with that list. I wrote down close to 200 people on that list, and I delivered close to 200 books to every single person. And, it's been really fascinating. Some people, a lot of the people responded with, wow, I didn't think that the impact I had on you was that great. Wow, I can't believe I deserve this. A lot of people said that they were not deserving of the words within that book. Many of the people have broken down. Many of the people continue to reach out to me, and some people couldn't even make a word. There was absolutely speechless. Some people read the first page to this day. True story. Some people only read the first page and they said they couldn't read the rest because it impacted them so much when they were able to read the opening letter from their mom. Their mom answering the question of what their child has meant to them or what makes them a gift in their lives. So it's experiences like that that I think truly matter and that impact us. And the impact of that, you can't really put a dollar on that. You can't really say, okay, if you read something like that, it's going to impact you in this particular way, because that's completely up to you. It's also completely up to where you are at within your own life, right? You might be going through the strongest storm, whatever adversity you're going through, the biggest adversity your life has had to offer to you. And so reading something like that, words of encouragement from people that you trust, from people that you believe in, that believe in you, I think it can shift things. I think it can transform experiences. And so for me, it really has become a no-brainer. Like, why wouldn't we do this? Why wouldn't we express these things when we're alive? Why
Mm.
wait? Why wait for an illness, right? And think about the times when we actually express a lot of these things. Person is ill or the person's not here. Why can't you do it on a random Tuesday?
The power that an encouraging word that can have on somebody. I feel even like I don't even wanna say anything in
Mm,
response to what you said because I'm like, "Yes, yes, 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 it's so good. I love this so much. It's so important." I am that person. I keep everything, cards, notes, screenshots, and I go back and I read them
that's
because
awesome.
it it gets me through, and anytime if I have this self-doubt, which I do, and I go back and I read these, it's everything. I mean, the relationships are everything, and when we were preparing last year, we had 2 hurricanes that came through, and we had to evacuate for one of them, and it was the first time that our whole building got evacuated, and we didn't necessarily feel like at threat because we were higher grounds, but it was this moment where it was like, we've never had to do this before where are under mandatory evacuation. So if there is damage in the apartment and if we were just kind of froze, what are we bringing? And I remember the only thing that we packed our stuff in the car and we went to the other side of the state, but it was just my albums and the letters. I was like, I don't really if I lose this, I feel like I lose what really matters to me,
Part of you.
and it comes back to the people.
And I think, thank you for sharing that, because it also makes me wonder how many different events that I have throughout my own or have had throughout my own life where I've been able to ask myself that same question of what's really important to me that's surrounding me. And how often do I wonder if other people have the opportunity to ask the same question? You don't have to have a hurricane, you don't have to have a tornado going through your town to be able to ask that question. But having had those experiences that you've had, it sounds like to some degree there's probably an element of gratitude because it's given you that chance, right? To look back at all your possessions and ask yourself, is this really important? What value do a lot of the things that I have around me really carry? And what value do I want them to carry moving forward beyond that? And so when I think about a lot of that, what you just said, another thing that comes to mind, and I think that's vulnerability. I've learned through my own journey that my relationship status with vulnerability was complicated for many, many years. It's something that I didn't choose to express. I felt that it was a weakness. I felt that no one else wanted to hear about it. And I ultimately didn't give myself the permission to feel, to experience the pure, real, raw emotions of what a person has meant to me or what a moment has meant to me. And so when I opened that box up, I realized that there's so many other people who are wanting to experience the same exact thing. But due to all of these other factors, busyness of life, distractions, responsibilities, this, that, and the other, it oftentimes seems like it doesn't have enough opportunities throughout the day to be vulnerable with somebody. Right. And so then it becomes something that is practiced here and there, but not as often as maybe it should be. But it's a really powerful thing to really be there with another individual, to really practice real raw emotion. I'm thinking of the different friendships that I've been able to do this with throughout my own life, to really hear what another person is going through, how they're feeling, how they're processing that, to be able to respond in a similar way. It's a really beautiful experience. I mean, talk about connection. That to me is the ultimate form of really being able to connect with another being.
So true. Also, just considering the kind of world and society I think that we're in and
Yeah.
very, like, hyper networking, transaction focused, like, what
Yeah.
is that next thing, the
Volume,
next.
volume, volume.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, and I
Yeah.
appreciate we could do a whole other, podcast on this. I appreciate your insights so much and your perspective from your own experience in that way, but it's so, I think, so important in that coming back to the rawness and real connection that we can have with one another. It's not losing sight of that and what truly matters. Like, to me, people ask, "What do you like to do for fun?" And I'm like, honestly, like, I just love hanging out with, like, my friends at a coffee shop. Like, okay, just things like that to me, that's like, that gives me life. And it sounds very basic, but it's like, it's true.
It's true.
It's the people in our lives. Like, yes, exploring, doing new things and traveling. And I feel very grateful for all these opportunities. And I love that. It, like, keeps me, it's that adventure and that newness. But then it also comes back to these relationships that we have, and picking up the phone and checking in real life, especially in the
Yeah.
world of social media. People are like, "Did you see my story?" I'm like, "No." It makes me sad. I really want to be intentional about that, of actually connecting with one another, calling people, texting, like, checking in real life, I think is so important, because also, again, we don't know what people are going through. And what we see on the surface is not always, half of the truth, I think. There's so much more there. So
Well, very few, I think, really, I mean, it might be true for all of us, want to open up in that way through a public eye, right? To really let the world, and I really, as I'm saying this, I think that maybe it's meant to be that way to some degree. Not everything is meant to be shared with everyone, right? But only myself or the people closest to me, or second, third, fourth tier type connections. And I think part of the reason why is because not everyone is going to be able to. Something that I'm learning about the different relationships within my own life is I'm realizing that depending on the challenge that I might be experiencing, not everyone that I have within my fingertips is going to be able to help me through that challenge. And so, in some ways, it's about me finding the balance of, okay, I'm experiencing this challenge. These are the people that I think might be able to help me work through this particular challenge. Let me make contact with them. So to some degree, not everyone is going to be able to be there for me as I'm experiencing that hardship or whatever it is, right? Just like not everyone is, I'm sure it's true within your own life, is able to create the space of pure and honest vulnerability, right? For you to be heard and vice versa. There are certain people that I'm sure you pick up the phone and call when it comes to circumstances like that. It's definitely true within my own life, and I'm sure it's true for a lot of other people. Just like there are other people who are very good at other things that I'm able to call, that some of these other individuals that I call for these matters are not able to help with. So I think to some degree, every single person has a purpose within our own lives. That's what I choose to believe. Really it becomes about identifying what is that purpose and what is their role. And then once I'm able to understand what that purpose and that role is of that individual, in some ways it makes it easier to navigate because then I'm not having to make a connection with that person with that particular ask and not having the opportunity for them to respond to that ask because they might not have the skill set or the tools or the mental capacity to be able to deal with that.
Totally. It's that discernment that I think also that comes with, experience too, right? And the more that, we learn about one another, and then you're able to, have the confidence in who it is that you are calling and for what, because you know that. This has been so good. First of all, thank you so much. I really just appreciate you being here in our conversation and allowing it to, to go where it goes. And I think to wrap up, I want your response to the question of what endurance means to you.
That's a really good question. What does endurance mean to me? I think it means a couple different things. I think it means being able to work through something. I think it's also a mindset, and that's being able to put myself in a position to think in the particular ways. For example, I'm thinking of different things throughout my own life that I believe require that, right? Require some endurance. Sports obviously comes to mind first. And to be able to compete at a very high level, I think a level of that is required in any given moment. Being able to push past a particular challenge, obstacle, whatever it is that's in front of me, and continuing on with the same level of momentum or even greater. I find sports to be fascinating, and I find this whole concept of endurance to be fascinating because it can also be so translatable into many other areas of life. I think life in general is all about having some endurance. It's about being able to continue on no matter how difficult things might get, right? Keep building the tools that I might need or already have, and then keep pushing through whatever it is. Because at the end of the day, I know that my days are numbered. I don't know how many there are left. I don't know who gave me the number, but I know they are. And I know it's true for a lot of us. I know it's true for you. I know it's true for everyone else. And for some people, the number is much lower than others. For some people, the number is much higher. That's going back to uncertainty. I don't know. I don't know whose is higher. I don't know whose is lower. I don't know what type of experiences impact that number at the end of the day. And so that's what endurance kind of means to me is I think it's a mindset. I think it's the ability to keep moving forward no matter what. Really good question.
Thank you.
Of course.
I appreciate your time and connecting and everything that you shared. Your perspectives are it's really valuable, and I know that I'm learning a lot just being on the other side of this conversation. And yeah, thanks for showing up.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.